Today's daily devotional by Pastor Greg Laurie. No compromise. How precious is your unfailing love, O God! All humanity finds shelter in the shadow of your wings. Psalm 36:7.
1 Kings chapter 18 tells the story of the prophet Elijah's epic showdown with the prophets of Baal and Asherah. But before that decisive contest occurs in the chapter, we find a brief encounter between two of God's servants that illustrates what real, difference-making servanthood looks like. The chapter begins with these words: "Later on, in the 3rd year of the drought, the Lord said to Elijah, 'Go and present yourself to King Ahab. Tell him that I will soon send rain.' So Elijah went to appear before Ahab." 1 Kings chapter 18, verses 1 through 2. Ahab and his wife Jezebel were two of the evilest characters in Israel's history. Not only did they oppose the God of Israel, but they also ordered the execution of his prophets, and Elijah was at the top of their hit list. Even so, when God told Elijah to confront Ahab, the prophet didn't hesitate to obey. On his way to find Ahab, Elijah encountered Obadiah, a devoted follower of the Lord, verse 3, who was also in charge of Ahab's palace. Obadiah had remained faithful to God in a difficult and dangerous environment. In fact, when Jezebel sought to kill the Lord's prophets, Obadiah hid 100 of them in caves and supplied them with food and water. See verses 3 through 4. His actions required courage and helped preserve the lives of God's servants. Yet Obadiah and Elijah represent two different ways of serving God during a time of spiritual crisis. Obadiah faithfully served the Lord from within Ahab's administration, while Elijah openly confronted the king and called the nation back to God. Both men were devoted to the Lord, but Elijah's assignment required a public stand. As believers, there are times when our faith is expressed through quiet faithfulness and courageous service behind the scenes. But there are also moments when God calls us to speak openly and stand firmly for what is right. If we remain silent when He calls us to speak, others may mistake our silence for approval. Look again at how Elijah instantly obeyed and firmly declared God's will. We need the courage of Elijah, who stood openly and boldly for the Lord. It is possible to believe quietly, as Obadiah did, but there are moments when God calls His people to speak and stand without compromise. Elijah realized that he stood in the presence of the most powerful king of all, God Himself. Elijah understood what David, the writer of Psalm 36, meant when he wrote, "How precious is your unfailing love, O God! All humanity finds shelter in the shadow of your wings." Have you ever tried to stand in someone's shadow? You must stay very close to the person. If they move, you must mirror their actions. Elijah stood in the shadow of God no matter where he was. Sometimes we forget that. We think that when we leave church, we somehow leave God's presence. The truth is, wherever we go, God is with us. When we stand in the presence of God, we will not bow before any person. Proverbs chapter 28 verse 1 says, "The godly are as bold as lions." There is no room for spiritual compromise in the lives of God's people. As you go about your day, I encourage you to think about this question. What would a refusal to compromise, spiritually speaking, look like in your life?